Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, happy Thanksgiving and welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for November 27th. This is episode number 1640, and do we have a great show today, William? Top of the morning to you. In just a few minutes, we will be joined by my good friend Ben Breiner, formerly of Go Gamecocks and the state, now doing great work over at thebigspur.com. And then, after about an hour of Ben Breiner, we'll be joined by Alex Jones of the Big Spur. We'll talk about the latest college football playoff rankings. I'll give my takes on changes and the path for the Gamecocks to make it to the college football playoff. And we will talk a lot of Gamecock football recruiting. So we have got a fantastic show. But first, let's get to our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area, nanasporch.com, your go-to for all your catering needs. Whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. So go to the homepage, nanasporch.com, nanasporch.com. Schedule your catering event while you're there. Now, for the first time, you can order Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. All you have to do is click on the headline that says pimento cheese on the homepage. It'll take you to a hyperlink where you can order the award-winning Nana's Porch pimento cheese, both flavors, smoky jalapeno and the great regular pimento cheese. Shipping is free of charge. It's delivered directly to your front doorstep, usually 2 days. If you order today, you'll probably get it on Friday, in plenty of time ahead of Saturday's magnificent football rivalry weekend, which kicks off actually on Friday night. And during the month of November, I'm asking everybody to order Nana's Porch pimento cheese and order extra, because $1 from every container sold will go to the North Carolina Fraternal Order of Police in Statesville for all of their remarkable humanitarian efforts, helping the folks in Western North Carolina that were devastated in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. And they continue to do so because there's still a lot of work to do up there. Frederick, top of the morning to you. So let's dive in to our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. Well, first of all, after Happy Thanksgiving, it's Clemson week. South Carolina and Clemson will meet on Saturday. Kickoff is at noon on ESPN. Roy Philpott. Are you kidding me? Roy Philpott is calling the game with Sam Acho. I'm still in disbelief of that. South Carolina and Clemson will meet for the 121st time. The rivalry dates back to 1896. South Carolina and Clemson met every year, and it was the second longest consecutive rivalry until COVID in 2020. They met every year from 1909 to 2019, only behind the Minnesota-Wisconsin series, but was interrupted in COVID. Clemson holds a 73-43 lead. There have been 4 ties in the series. I was there for the last one of those in 1986 when Scott Hagler shanked a field goal after Sterling Sharp made an unbelievable catch. I mean, go back. The game's on YouTube. He laid all the way out. His body was parallel to the ground. It was like some Neo stuff from the Matrix. At the 10-yard line, too, by the way. Clemson only leads the series 19-11-1 at Clemson. They used to play on Thursday. It was Big Thursday. That's why my Thursday show on Gamecock Pod Daily is called the Big Thursday Show. In Columbia, Clemson had their 7-game win streak, which is the longest of my lifetime, broken the last time the two teams played in Death Valley. And that was a 30-28 win. I'm sorry. I guess the Gamecocks trailed 30-28, and Mitch Jeter hit a field goal, and the Gamecocks held on to knock off number 7 Clemson 31-30. The Gamecocks overcame a 14-point deficit, in part due to Spencer Rattler throwing a pick 6. And he also threw another interception in the end zone. It really shouldn't have been close. So South Carolina and Clemson Saturday at noon on ESPN. I think for the first time, I'm turning down the volume on the TV, and I'm going to sync it up with Todd and Tommy and listen to them. The Gamecocks made a major move last night in the college football playoff rankings. South Carolina last week had been 18. They move up to 15. Oregon is number 1. Ohio State number 2. Texas 3. Penn State 4. Notre Dame 5. Miami 6. Georgia 7. Tennessee 8. SMU moved up 4 spots to number 9. Indiana, after getting shellacked by Ohio State, is 10th. Boise State is 11th. Clemson comes in at 12th, and that's good news for the Gamecocks. South Carolina will have an opportunity to jump Alabama and Ole Miss. To me, the dream scenario is you got to pull for Southern Cal to beat Notre Dame. That would knock them out. South Carolina beats Clemson. That gives them their 4th ranked win in November, and they jump Alabama and Ole Miss. And I also think you need Texas to win out, which I'm not so sure they'll be able to do. There is a path. So we'll see what happens. Clayton White yesterday was nominated for the Broyles Award, which recognizes college football's top assistant coach by the Frank and Barbara Broyles Foundation. That was announced yesterday. Of course, White is in his 4th year at South Carolina, uses the flex nickel. The Gamecocks rank among the nation's top 20 defenses in nearly every statistical category, including 14th in scoring defense, 12th in rush defense, 19th in pass efficiency defense, 13th in total defense, 14th in turnovers, 3rd in sacks, 12th in tackles for loss, and 17th in opponents' third down. The Gamecocks are giving up only 32%. And on opponents' 4th down, Gamecocks are 7th. This year, a record 65 nominees were selected from over 1,500 assistant coaches representing 131 FBS programs. The Broyles Award selection process includes the Football Writers Association of America, College Football Broadcasters, and College Football Hall of Fame Selection Committee, as well as current head coaches. The next step will be 15 semifinalists, and then from that list, 5 finalists, and then the winner. And I think Clayton White should go all the way down to the final 5, particularly if South Carolina wins on Saturday. Gamecock linebacker Demetrius Knight has been selected to play in the Reese's Senior Bowl. The 6'2", 245-pound thumper from Locust Grove, Georgia, who spent 4 years at Georgia Tech and then last year led Charlotte in tackles with 96, was first team All-American Athletic Conference. And this year, he's 2nd on the team at South Carolina in tackles with 65, second only to Nick Eamon-Warry, who, by the way, is probably going to be an All-American and an All-SEC performer. And Demetrius Knight worthy of being an All-SEC performer as well. 65 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, including the big one on that fake punt at Oklahoma. 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 pass breakups. He's one of my favorite players on the team, and he's got a unique story. He's got 2 kids. He's married. He's 24 years old. He's got a 19-month-old and a 4-year-old, and every Gamecock walk, he's listening to the band and dancing. He doesn't have his headphones on. He said, because we never get to see the band. We're always in the locker room before the game and at halftime. He says, I'm going to let the band know I see them and I'm supporting them. A great dude and a very deserving nomination for him to represent South Carolina in the Senior Bowl. He will not be the only Gamecock senior that will be playing in an all-star game. All right, the Carolina Band. Tomorrow morning, turn on any of the networks. They'll all be playing the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The Carolina Band will be there. I think they played on one of the morning shows this morning. They're already in New York City. Thanks to Darius Rucker, Shane Beamer, and Dawn Staley. So you'll get to show your kiddos, or you can just watch it and see the Carolina Band tomorrow. All right, tonight, men's basketball back in action. The Fort Myers finale in the consolation bracket. The Gamecocks, after blowing a 5-point halftime lead against Xavier, they will take on my old friend Mike Young and the Virginia Tech Hokies tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern on FS1, or you can listen to the incomparable Derek Scott and the Judge Casey Manning on 107.5 The Game. South Carolina's women's basketball dropped to number 4 this week after being thumped Sunday at UCLA 77-62. They will be back in action in Fort Myers tomorrow on Thanksgiving Day at 1:30. They will take on number 15 Iowa State, who also has a loss. They were number 8 in the preseason. They'll take on number 15 Iowa State at 1:30 on Fox. All right. William says we need Vandy to beat Tennessee. That would be great as well. But I think we need Texas to win out, because if Georgia wins the SEC, Alabama and Ole Miss will both have wins over the SEC champion. So I still think it would be the most Quinn Ewers thing ever for Quinn Ewers to wet the bed Saturday night in College Station. Hopefully the Horns can pull it out. So it has been a November to remember. Gamecocks are going to be 5-0 or 4-1. They have wins over 3 ranked teams: Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. Missouri's still ranked. They're probably going to end up 9-3. And quite frankly, that's South Carolina's best win, guys and gals. South Carolina is the only team to defeat Missouri when Brady Cook has gone the distance. Think about that. Missouri was a top 10 team in the preseason in the first month of the season. He misses some games. They get beat by Alabama and Texas A&M. That's it. I think they play Arkansas on Saturday. At any rate, Thanksgiving is a day tomorrow. I'm off on Friday. We'll be back on Gamecock Pod Daily with the Football Friday show, previewing the South Carolina Clemson game and all of the rivalry weekend games. But right now, let's get to our interview with Ben Breiner. Leave your questions, your comments in the Nana's Porch chat box. Full disclosure, I'm wearing a different color pullover because we recorded both of these interviews due to the short week yesterday and last night. So here is my in-depth conversation with Ben Breiner on Gamecock football, on bowl possibilities, on the improvement of the offense, the defense, everything. And then we will take it to the limit with South Carolina winning their game against Clemson. And we'll see what happens in the college football playoff. So Ben Breiner on the Gamecocks, on the improvement, and the Clemson Tigers right now. And we welcome back into the program our good friend Ben Breiner, formerly of the State, now special work at thebigspur.com with the video breakdowns each and every week for the postmortem and previewing the next opponent. Ben, Thanksgiving's coming up, and so what is your favorite side and your favorite meat for Thanksgiving?
The favorite side is stuffing till I die. It is really one of our finest foods and frankly should be eaten more almost all the time, even if it probably will kill me. For favorite meat, I'm a turkey dark meat kind of guy. That tends to be what I go with. I grew up in a house that didn't eat pork, so ham was never on the menu, and we never really. I know some people will do like a roast, or they'll try to do something, cheeky with it. But I'm just, some good turkey dark meat, drowned in gravy. That's what it is.
All right. So in the South, we call stuffing dressing, and not stuffing. But I don't know what you call. I guess they probably call it stuffing here in Texas, but in South Carolina, usually it's dressing. So cranberry sauce out of the can or no?
I think it's fine. I think all cranberry sauces should be welcome.
Okay. All right. So next question. Before the season, it is Carolina Clemson week. Did you think we'd be sitting here the week of the South Carolina Clemson game wondering that if the Gamecocks beat Clemson, not only would they have 9 wins, but they possibly could be in the college football playoff?
Not only did I not think that, I'll be brutally honest here. So, a little behind the curtain moment. At a point back, I think in the summer, I had been chatting with John Whittle of the Big Spur, legend that he is, and every year I usually am like, if y'all can get me a seat in the press box for one game, that'd be great. Understand it's full. People like covering it. And I think the basketball schedule came out. He was going to go to Indiana. And because of that, it opened up a spot in the Missouri game. And I thought, that might be a really dour scene. Like, Missouri was supposed to be good. South Carolina, we didn't know. And I was like, like, I don't think it'll be that bad, but it could be. And then I remember going into that game and thinking, South Carolina is favored by almost 2 touchdowns to win 8 games. Yeah, no, I had no idea about that one.
I mean, not only the 8 games, but the 9 games.
It's right there.
Right? I mean, just the fact, I thought 8 wins was probably the ceiling for this team. Now they potentially could win double-digit games, even if they don't make the college football playoff. I think a lot of that to do with the maturity of LaNorris Sellers. So here's the stat. In the last 6 games, that begins with the Alabama game in which he basically outplayed Jalen Milroe for the entire game except for the fourth quarter fumble. All right, guys, bear with me. We're having a little technical difficulties. I guess they don't understand. We still got a show to do at AT&T. And so, again, here is Ben Breiner. And we welcome back into the program.
Be high school Superman in the sense that, you know, when you're playing high school ball in Florence, you can wait a while.
So here's the stat. In the last 6 games, that begins with the Alabama game in which he basically outplayed Jalen Milroe for the entire game except for the fourth quarter fumble, which was brutal. Sellers is 110 of 159 for 69.2%, 1,555 yards, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 289 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns, including the 106-yard performance against Texas A&M. This cat has really, the game has slowed down for him, and all the talk from last year through spring practice, through the summer, that, hey, LaNorris Sellers is that dude. I think we're finally starting to see that.
I would definitely agree. And I think in terms of the slowing down, the thing that I've most noticed, and some of this might be a little confirmation bias because I think he wasn't doing it earlier in the year, is someone, and I might have even talked about it on here, someone on the BigSpur.com described some of his early play as trying to be high school Superman, in the sense that, you know, when you're playing high school ball in Florence, you can wait a while because you're bigger than every linebacker and probably half the defensive line. And it seemed like at times he'd hold the ball a little longer, he tried to do a little more, and sometimes you throw the ball to Rocket Sanders, who's sneaky good in space, and he just does stuff. And maybe you get 4, and maybe you get 6, and maybe you get 30. And it feels like when he's at its best, he's looking deep, he's occasionally pushing it, but he's also knowing when it's just time to give the ball to a good playmaker for 3 yards, and they're good enough to get 2 more. And guess what? 2nd and 5 is a great down. It's a super nice down to have. And I think he's really matured in terms of that. And he's done it without fully capping that sort of madcap Houdini skill that he has. He'll still have plays where he almost goes down and uses the ball to keep his balance, which is insanely sloppy in some ways, but it'll produce enough big plays and probably enough fumbles that you sort of live with it. But I think it's a little bit of just the phrase I use, and I even use this a lot with Spencer Rattler, take what is given. And he's become really good at taking what's given, but not without being so mechanical that it limits the big play stuff, which is just a lot of quarterbacks don't do that at all. So,
well, I mean, no doubt about it. So let's talk about that Missouri game since you were there. Eli Drinkwitz sandbagged all week long on Brady Cook. And then you find out that morning Brady Cook is playing. And honestly, I think the Missouri win is South Carolina's best win of the season, because I think Missouri with Brady Cook is a top 10 team. Because if you go back to earlier in the season with Brady Cook, they bounced around from 9 or 10 up to as high as 6 or 7. And then Brady Cook got beat or got injured, and they got boat raced back-to-back weeks by Alabama, who seems to be Jekyll and Hyde now, and Texas A&M, which is great at home and awful on the road, as we've now witnessed them losing to probably the worst team in the Southeastern Conference, Auburn.
Yeah, I do think it's a good win, and I think it's interesting you mentioned Cook, because my thought going into that game was if Cook does play, he won't be 100%. And, he looked pretty good. He looked like he wanted no part of contact, but in terms of throwing the ball, he looked good. I will say there was one funny moment when there was a false start and it wasn't clear if the defense could hear it. And Cook literally had to like wave his arms to be like, the play is dead. Please don't touch me, which sometimes you'd want to try to draw that penalty. And you could see he was clearly like, no, we are not doing that. But yeah, I think it was an impressive win also because it showed gumption. Like there was a certain gumption beating Texas A&M in terms of holding a lead, and then finally breaking through. But like, just in terms of getting put in that tough spot with a young quarterback, you have 2 1-minute drives two 2 to 1 minute drives from a second year quarterback. Like Missouri's defense is still pretty good. Like it's not as great as it has been, but the D line is still good. And the back seven is still perfectly respectable. Like that's not an easy team to go win a game against. And yeah, I think it's a little interesting because I think that there's a whole other topic about how the larger conference is creating some of these sort of bubbly teams. Like Texas A&M and Missouri don't have like particularly great schedules to this point when it comes to conference play. Whereas South Carolina does. But I ultimately think like, they've notched some really nice wins, and that Missouri team, I didn't think as much of them coming in, and the way Brady Cook played made me say, oh, yeah, they got a little more to them.
I mean, clearly their run game is completely different than anything else South Carolina faces all season. Clayton White admitted as much in the coordinator press conference the week after the game, going into the Wofford game, and that he's probably got to work on that a little bit every week to get the team ready for it, because you can't get a look. And then you add Brady Cook, who is a witch, Luther Burden, and Theo Weiss, and that defense. They've done the best job on Rocket Sanders basically all season long, especially the second half of the season. But LaNorris Sellers just went completely nuts. 21 of 30, 353 yards, 5 touchdowns. They had the 1 minute drives, both under 60 seconds of game time to end the first half and end the game. Since that second open date, we know the first open date, Rocket Sanders and LaNorris Sellers were not healthy. They didn't get better as football players. They tried to get them better to be able to play the next game, which just happened to be Ole Miss, and Carolina completely laid an egg. By the way, wasn't that just the most Lane Kiffin thing ever to lose that game in the Swamp? I actually said that last Friday when I did my drive around the SEC. I said, wouldn't that just be the most Lane Kiffin thing ever to beat Georgia and then go on the road and lose to Florida and essentially get knocked out of the playoff?
I definitely didn't use a telephone application that is legal in the state of North Carolina to put like a quarter on Florida with 3-1 odds. Didn't do that at all. Nope. Didn't just think, well, that would be funny. Let's see how let it ride. But yeah, I mean, I think that coming out of those buys, like I think, and I've written about this, it was really apparent in the Alabama game, and it's basically been apparent the rest of the season, is that Rocket Sanders can kind of bounce between being the guy who just blows up tacklers and someone who's a little more tentative. And it's always kind of that meter. And if he's on the like blowing through tacklers side of things, it completely changes this offense. And if he's a little tentative, then they kind of start grinding out a little less. And they're not a terribly great grinded out offense anyway. They're kind of big play reliant. So when Rocket isn't there, it kind of completely upsets the apple cart. But he is just run possessed like you watch the finish on that touchdown against Missouri where like the staff is like, oh, cool, he got a first down. And he's like, no, I'm going to break 4 more tackles and we're just going to end this sucker right here. And that's kind of like, that's what you recruit him for. And through the first half of the season, you saw moments of it. And now it's just like, I mean, that's why you get good players. You get good players so they can do cool, good stuff. And yeah, it took chunks of a season for it really to come together. But I mean, again, it started in the Alabama game. You just saw stretches where you were like, huh, they can't tackle him. All right.
I mean, I thought Missouri, they essentially, and I said this, at some point after you saw Texas A&M and Vanderbilt, you knew teams were not just going to let South Carolina run the football and throw it to Joshua Simon 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage and let him run 20 yards with it. And to Dow Loggins' credit, he came up with a way to beat that. And against Missouri, they had 462 yards, 353 passing, 109 on the ground. And that was a game I thought Rocket, he kind of struggled. He was tentative. Missouri kind of got in his head, but he cleared his head in that timeout before they ran that shuffle pass, because that was like the Incredible Hulk. He was like a 30-pound bowling ball that was being rolled by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was just not going to be denied.
No, I mean when he's going, it is a game changer, and it's been kind of wild to watch. And you know, I was thinking back to that opener where he kind of looked so, and it was like, okay, is that going to be a problem for the rest of the year? And now you got him, and really, you know, you have him coming along. You have the offensive line finding itself a lot better. They worked in a little bit more of what you call like the power concept, which is you got just a pulling guard. They did a lot of it for quarterbacks early in the year, and they started working it in a little bit more for the running backs. And they found some pretty good success with that. So it's not like they left a bunch of the stuff they were doing, but they added that little bit in and started running it better. And I think that has also, I don't know if it's been like a huge game changer, but I think it's been a nice little extra piece that's helped them out.
So I was going to say, to me, the biggest thing I've noticed since after the Oklahoma game, I was in Norman for that, by the way. It's a really cool environment, beautiful stadium. I didn't realize, but you think back, they have 7 Heisman Trophy winners. They have trophies of all of them. They call it Heisman Alley, and they got a did I say statue or trophy? They have statues of all of them. And then they have a statue of all 3 of the Selman brothers. And Leroy Selman was my favorite Oklahoma player ever. So that was cool. And then you go in the stadium on the press box, they got all their national championships, their, I don't know, like 50 conference championships, all their All-Americans, their bowl championships, everything. And that win is looking a lot better for South Carolina now. More on that in a little bit. So after the Oklahoma game, South Carolina had the open date. Rocket Sanders got better. LaNorris Sellers got better. I kind of saw some shifts in the run game to more outside zone, pin and pull, and the power concepts, because most of the time, outside the quarterback runs, South Carolina had been an inside zone team. And then I heard Connor Shaw on a podcast, a preview, and he said, you know, Dow Loggins historically has been an outside zone guy. And I found that interesting because you really hadn't seen outside zone until after the second open date. We noticed fewer receivers playing, bigger receivers playing, because I think the success of those outside zone schemes and pin and pull are reliant on the perimeter blocking. And I think we've seen a lot better perimeter blocking down the stretch by Nick Harbor, Delvon Campbell, Bennett, even Gage Larvadane, as small as he is at times, and Brown when he's been out there.
I can agree with that. I think they've definitely done more sweep stuff. I think they've maybe a little more outside zone. Outside zone's tough because, like we were talking about with Missouri earlier, like you kind of have to live outside zone and really build for it. And I feel like South Carolina has often not totally been built for it, which is fine because they do other stuff. But I would definitely agree about the perimeter blocking. And especially like I feel like we are maybe not giving enough shout outs to Nick Harbor with the progress he's made, because like, you know what, if you have a big receiver and he's a big athlete and he's blocking hard. I mean, he played like every snap of, I can't remember which one of the games he played every single snap at receiver and was just blocking the hell out of people. And that shows that a guy, you know, he might not be, you know, throwing up 5-star receiving numbers, but he's out there, cares, and he's hard. And if you're doing that, good stuff happens. And he's looked more natural as a wide receiver in the last few weeks. And like, you know, is he ever going to totally live up to that 5-star thing? I don't know, because that's hard to do. But you know what? He's turning himself into a pretty solid college receiver and a good player to have out there. And that ain't nothing. But yeah, I think they've definitely gotten their sweep game a little bit better. I think the power has sort of helped because it's a lot of those plays, they allow for a little more bouncing in a way that Rocket was bouncing inside zone a decent bit, but it seems like it's a little more effective when the rest of the game is kind of going for him. And yeah, I think that the offense has matured in a way because certain stuff worked, a couple of add-ons worked, and that allows everything to sort of spiral outward. If you're good at your basics, then you can start playing with your basics. You know, they have that quarterback sweep for Sellers, which has been effective. I think they've had it for a while, though it looks like a lot of what Jalen Milroe likes to run. And then against Missouri, they're like, all right, well, let's just run that play and throw because it's a good tendency breaker. And I think I actually might have been in the press box and been like, it'd be kind of cool if they went for the sweep and threw it here. And they didn't. I was like, I see where you're going.
I mean, I thought like the first one, when he really rode out the zone read and then pulled it and threw, it drew the entire defense up. The guy was wide open. I think that was the one to Simon.
Pop pass.
And then on the sweep, they hit Michael Smith, who unfortunately I think hurt his shoulder when the guy fell on him in the end zone. But you mentioned Harbor, and I think not only do we need to shout out Mike Furrey on his development, but I think because you've got a guy that is the number one freak in college football, at least according to Bruce Feldman's list for the 2 years running now. And he is 6'5", 230, and he does run 10, 100 meters. And now he is catching the ball. And he is running by SEC corners. I think that just the legitimate threat of him, and he is making plays and he is making catches, but the threat of him being a vertical threat guy that you have to defend the length of the field on him, when he runs out of there, it opens up everything else. And I think guys like Delvon Campbell and Gage Larvadane and even Jared Brown have taken advantage of that.
I think that's fair. I think they're developing into like a nice balanced receiving core. Like it's not necessarily like you have that one true X that you're just like put him on one side of the field and he'll whip a corner if he's got one-on-one coverage. But they've just got a lot of guys who are pretty good. Josh Simon's kind of a guy who can whip folks, but he's not necessarily, he's obviously a tight end. And I think they've got a nice balanced group. I think that's going to be an interesting group to watch through the offseason. But yeah, and it certainly helps when Campbell is doing a really good job of working his way open. Like, I was sort of hoping at the beginning of the season, I was thinking, oh, this guy could be something. And it took a while, but he had several very enormous plays. So good on him for sticking with it. Cause a lot of guys in the transfer portal world would just be like, whatever, I came here and I didn't get my opportunity. Bad luck. Screw it. And instead he just kept putting in the work, and all of a sudden he's, saving their bacon against Missouri.
So is he the 2022 Nate Adkins of this offense?
That feels right. That feels correct. That feels it. It's funny. He's reminding me of a basketball player that no one who's listening to this has ever heard of, who was at my alma mater and was like a perfectly nice, good 20-minute a game bench player for most of his career, but could never break into the starting lineup. And then someone quit in the middle of the year, and then he stepped in and played 30 minutes a game and was like a key part of a late run. And yeah, Nate Adkins is a good call, where it's like, I think it's a little different, because I think with Nate Adkins, I think Nate Adkins was a little buried on the depth chart, and I think they couldn't totally figure out what they had with him. Like, he didn't look like a guy. Maybe didn't practice like a guy who was like ready to make all those plays, and then he started doing it, and you were like, oh, dang. Whereas I get, reading between the lines, I get the sense that maybe there were some focus issues that Campbell had to figure his way through. But you know what? Sometimes it clicks for guys. I think back to Josh Vann, who for a long time in his career was kind of a little all over the place, and then finally locked in, and it was suddenly like, yeah, you're pretty good. But yeah, I mean,
or could it have been that just Marcus Satterfield was that big of a moron?
All things are possible.
I agree. And Campbell had a 50-yarder for a touchdown negated on a play that I really took exception with, because the offensive lineman was on the ground and kind of rolled into that area.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like he was running down the field. He kind of tried to block his guy and thought he was going to hit him, head on. And the guy kind of moved, and he bounced off and rolled. Campbell would have had 178 yards against Wofford if that one stands. But he had two huge plays. He's showing run after the catch ability to step through and break tackles. That's been really big. So is the screen game, which I want to talk about, because that had not worked at all for South Carolina. And not only they hit Rocket Sanders on the running back delayed screen, before the half, Missouri's in that too deep shell. And they say, well, let's just run the tunnel screen here. And that was, by the way, the same play they ran for Juice Wells at Georgia last year when he scored and then re-broke his foot in the end zone in Athens.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very good to them. And I think the first thing you said, we talked about perimeter blocking before. That's been better. The offensive linemen have also done yeoman's work, just sprinting their big selves out into space and not necessarily destroying anyone, but getting in someone's way, getting hands on a corner, doing enough. I would say doing enough to limit defensive angles. So, instead of a defender being able to kind of shoot right past, they've got to hesitate a little bit and try to figure their way, negotiate around it. And that creates space. And then I think the other thing that's helped is that I think Jared Brown, and I really think Rocket Sanders, there is something about those dudes and the way they negotiate open space that is pretty special. it's weird to watch Rocket Sanders because he gets into space and like people just suddenly like maybe he's just big enough or just shifty enough. People just have no idea how to approach it. I mean, like I think Rocket Sanders is very good. I don't think Rocket Sanders is necessarily like so quick and shifty that a safety should be spinning himself like a top, trying to get his like shoulders to the correct space. And he's done it like 3 times on guys. People just, and maybe some of it's because he's so big that they think they need to really load up. But like he gets into space and people do not know how to get to him. And that kind of goes back to some of that, when I was talking about take what is given. Dumping a ball off to Rocket Sanders is a really, really high ceiling choice to make. And they are getting better at doing it. And, you throw that guy a couple of blocks, throw in that factor, and all of a sudden you got big plays for days.
So I really thought that was about the only mistake. Well, LaNorris, he had the overthrow for the interception, and he kind of short-armed a guy on a ball. But on one of the 4th downs, he overthrew Joshua Simon on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
The check down to Rocket Sanders was open, and I'm with you. Even though he was short of the line to gain, there was open space, and it was one-on-one with him with a safety. I'm hedging, and I'm betting Rocket Sanders. I'll take that bet. Give me Rocket Sanders one-on-one in space with the chance to beat a guy for a first down. I'll take that every time. I thought that was really the one bad mistake. I mean, overthrows are going to happen.
I was going to say, and that might even be a play flow thing. I looked at it a couple times. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but it might have been this thing Spur really liked where you run a corner over like a little hitch. And
high-low.
Yeah, well, and the read on that is the high-low, and the corner went low. So in theory, you should go high. But, and this is Coach Breiner's random opinion. I always find that tricky on 3rd downs because if the answer is like, you got to throw that corner route, unless that corner route is real open, like it just tends to be a trickier throw in my opinion. And I feel like watching 6, 7, 8 years of Gamecocks football, I've seen more than a few times where they throw the smash on 3rd down and you throw that corner shot and it's like, especially and if they man up for some reason, I think the read usually is the corner, that corner throw. And like, it's just a tricky one. And so like the read might have just been to throw to him. And in that case, again, Coach Breiner might not call that play on 3rd down or have that concept, but I'm also not in practice. Maybe LaNorris Sellers hits that 9 times out of 10 and easy peasy. But as you were saying, like get the ball to Rocket Sanders with a little bit of space and you're happy. You're most of the time really happy.
I mean, no doubt. So I have to say, like mid-season, I really did not think Dow Loggins was the offensive coordinator for LaNorris Sellers because, let's face it, he was brought in for Spencer Rattler to make sure Rattler either didn't grad transfer and go someplace else or to say, hey, we got this NFL guy. You can really increase your draft stock with him. Unfortunately, I don't think anybody realized Juice Wells would be injured and there'd be 0 offensive tackles in the program outside of a true freshman who had to play left tackle that was any good. But since that second open date, South Carolina, 530 yards against Texas A&M, 452 at Vandy, including 9 of 12 on 3rd down, on the same field where Vanderbilt beat Alabama badly. Missouri, 462 yards total offense, 4 of 10 on 3rd down. They were South Carolina, even with the 530 against A&M, 4 of 13 on third down, but I do think they were really good on fourth down in that game. And then Wofford, 608 yards and 10 of 12. South Carolina in the last 4 has been 57.4% on third down, and that raises their season level to 41%. In the first half of the season, they were around 32% on third down. Is it mostly Sellers? Is it Sellers and Loggins and Rocket? What's been the secret sauce to all of this? Because I think he's been brilliant since the second open date in every single game.
Do you mean the third down stuff or the offensive improvement overall?
Both.
Okay. So the third down stuff, I think it starts with having a guy like Rocket. You get better third downs, and they've generated better third downs. And if you generate a better third down, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, I can run LaNorris Sellers power. I can just hand the ball to Rocket Sanders. And more often than not, that's a good bet. Whereas I can't do that as much on 3rd and 8. Now, 3rd and 8's still been up and down, but you've had, 4 or 5 moments of Sellers magic on 3rd down. So that's helped as well.
Harry Houdini, the escape artist.
Exactly. So I think they've generated better ones. They've blocked better. The run game, finding that groove, is just a game changer on third and short, and generating 3rd and shorts. And the Harry Houdini moments. You'd still. I think they've also, they have some good pet plays now. So if it's 3rd down and you call that RPO that gets the ball to the flat with Josh Simon, like, you have that in your back pocket and it's hard to defend. So I think you got a lot of guys playing well. In terms of the overall offense, I'm going to throw one more stat at you. In every game since the bye week, South Carolina their average play has gone 7 yards or more in every game. And the worst game for that was Wofford. If you take Wofford out, the lowest was 7.2 yards per game. That's bananas. That is a bananas number. It is crazy. And it feels like they were a big play offense early, and they're generating enough consistency to really raise that, to really buoy that underneath. And yeah, I think I described it on the BigSpur.com in a message board post. It's been a cocktail of things. Almost everyone has stepped up. Like, the play calling matured in a nice way. LaNorris Sellers found himself. Rocket Sanders is doing more of that hard running. The offensive line, in terms of at least run blocking, also really found itself. And the receivers, while none of them is like going all Pharaoh Cooper on anyone, everyone got mildly more consistent. And
they are catching the ball. They're not the big drops that you saw earlier in the season.
It's like a rising tide. It's like, there's something I've noticed with certain college football teams when you look at like their statistical profiles, and it's like, if you're top 30 at a bunch of stuff, you're top 10 overall because you're good at a lot of stuff. And I think that's what happened to this offense. Everyone has taken, some people have taken a big jump like Sellers, and some people have taken just a modest jump, but everyone's taken at least a modest jump. And, rising tide, all boats, all that stuff.
So switching. All right, so we're back. We're getting ready to approach the top of the next hour. More with Ben Breiner on your way. The second hour of today's show, once again, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area, Nana's Porch. Go to nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. Your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, especially now that the weather is cooling off. And by the way, Saturday at Clemson, pack your winter coat, because if you get there early, it's going to be cold. The high is only going to be 51 degrees. Kickoff will probably be in the 40s. And if you're out there tailgating in the early morning, it's going to be in the 30s. And so once again, in the month of November, you can order Nana's Porch pimento cheese, not just in November, but every month. Go ahead and order now. In the month of November, Nana's Porch is donating $1 from every container of pimento cheese sold to the North Carolina Fraternal Order of Police. It's easy to order. You can order it in 2 packs, 4 packs, 6. Shipping is absolutely free of charge. Both flavors have been number one the last 2 years in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. 2 years ago, it was the great regular flavor. Last year, it was smoky jalapeno, and regular flavor came up number 2. It's affordable. You'll love it. It's great to have in your refrigerator, and you'll be helping a great cause by donating to the Fraternal Order of Police that have done tremendous humanitarian work for all the folks devastated by the impact of Hurricane Helene. Back to the show and more Ben Breiner in the second hour on Gamecock Pod Live. Gears to defense just briefly before I ask you a couple questions about Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the season, did you have Kyle Kennard and Demetrius Knight on your bingo card as maybe the two most impactful players on the defense outside? And I would say, in retrospect, outside of Nick Eamon-Warry, who is putting together an All-American, all SEC type of season.
I will say I did have Kyle Kennard. I had talked to someone in the personnel space who regularly has very low opinions of everyone. And he goes, "Oh, Kyle Kennard. Oh yeah, no, that guy's good. Like, that's a good pickup for them." And, sometimes when you talk to someone who's tough with the compliments, you're like, okay. Demetrius Knight less so. I thought Demetrius Knight would be a nice rotation linebacker. I did not think he was a person who would apply every bit of his high-end athleticism and just kick the hell out of people. I'll be honest, I didn't between him and Bam Martin-Scott, I thought they would be good at they would be solid to good at linebacker. But those guys' ceilings are high, they hit them more than I thought. So yeah, I'll say I felt good about Kennard. I felt fine about Knight. I certainly didn't see this happening, but right now, Debo Williams might be your number 3 linebacker.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think if Ben
Kamara
had stayed, Debo Williams, quite frankly, would have been your number 4 linebacker. I don't think Clayton White fully saw that because of, Debo was his guy, but clearly Demetrius Knight and Bam Martin-Scott are the best 2 linebackers, and even the snap count has been bearing that out. Recently, Clayton White finally had that epiphany, and I will say this, I was a big critic of him. Last year, he did not have the Jimmies and Joes. You add Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard versus Tyreek Johnson and Jordan Strong, and both of those guys were playing on one leg. That is markedly different, and so is Demetrius Knight and Bam Martin-Scott instead of Debo Williams and the flow guy that went to Mississippi State.
I'll also give some credit. At the end of last season, they started tackling better and playing harder in those last 3 or 4 games. And I thought to myself, if they'd done this all of last season, they would have beaten Florida and the vibes would have been a lot better. And I was like, who knows if they carry it forward? They did. They carried it forward. They added the right pieces who hit. And I'll also say this, they did some really good development in terms of Judge Collier is a pretty good SEC corner in his first year. He is not bad. Vakari Swain is a nice 3rd corner. Good work by Torian Gray there. Obviously, Nick takes that step all the way to All-American. DQ Smith has been pretty decent. Peyton Williams has showed up some. OD has even stabilized his game more than he did last year. Like, we're talking about, rising tide lifting all boats. Like, just a lot of people hit and a lot of stuff came together. And when you put that all together, you've got a defense that, statistically is, top 15, top 10 quality.
No doubt. So Kyle Kennard is 2 sacks away from breaking Jadeveon Clowney's record. He will have the opportunity, perfect segue, to do so on the same field where Jadeveon Clowney set that record 12 years ago. God, it's been that long. When he had, I can't remember if they gave him credit for all 5 or if it was 4.5 sacks at Death Valley in 2012. He set the record at 13. Kennard's got 11.5. So 2 sacks on Saturday on that same field would be very ironic. Tell me what you see from your study and looking at Clemson's offense and how South Carolina's defense matches up.
I mean, I think I'll start with this. I think South Carolina's defense matches up well with every offense because I think they're really good. But in terms of this Clemson offense, it's interesting to watch. They like a lot of their power running, but they don't really have a second running back. Cade Klubnik isn't powerful necessarily, but he's very shifty, and they can get a lot of stuff working with him, especially to help the RPO game. I think they're decent run blocking team, not unbelievable. In terms of their pass game, it's a lot of quick stuff. It feels like it's a lot of quick stuff, and then a decent amount of just trying to take advantage of Klubnik's live arm. They're tempo-y, but not as fast as they used to be potentially. I think their receivers, I think their outside receivers are decent, bigger guys, not super fast. They're fine. They can make you pay in some situations, but it's, it's not like, trying to hold on to a building or anything. Antonio Williams, probably their best offensive playmaker in my mind. He's kind of a terror in the slot. I imagine Kilgore is going to get first crack at him. Be interested to see how that kind of goes. They're definitely enough to be a problem.
I think Nick probably wants that matchup. That's an Irmo Dexport matchup.
Could be. I also think that they are prone to having moments of Cade Klubnik can be a little turnover prone, a little fumbling, and I think at times he gets big eyes. That hasn't paid off that much in interceptions this year. He's only got 4, but I always like to keep an eye on quarterbacks who really think that they can really do everything. So I'd be interested to see if South Carolina can box him in a little bit and kind of make him make, I guess, maybe more traditional plays. I think it's a good offensive scheme. I think they have a lot of nice pieces. I don't think they're necessarily. This isn't Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne. This isn't Deshaun Watson and all those dudes they had back in 2015 and 16. It's a quite good group, and I think overall, in terms of a game, like this is 2 pretty good teams that are on the fringe of playoff contention. That's just what it is, and they're pretty equal overall in my mind.
So, in the did you know category, this will be the 7th time that both South Carolina and Clemson come into the Palmetto Bowl ranked, and the first time since 2013. And in the 6 previous games, South Carolina is 5-1. The only loss shouldn't have been a loss. That was the Rod Gardner push-off in 2000 at Death Valley, where for some reason the ref said that Woody Dantzler threw a ball 60 yards in the air that was tipped at the line of scrimmage. And there was kind of like Ryan Williams was covered up on that touchdown against Oklahoma on Saturday. We could have an entirely different podcast about SEC officiating. South Carolina won. It was my first Carolina-Clemson game in person in 1979. South Carolina beat Clemson 13-9 in 1987. That was the first South Carolina-Clemson game played at night. The Gamecocks, that was the Rodney game where Brad Edwards had 2 interceptions and a pick six, 20-7 in 2000. That's the one Clemson won 16-14. You can guess the next 3 were 2011, 2012, and 2013. And the
I've heard of
11-2 Spurrier team. South Carolina won all of those games by double digits. 2011, they won 34-13. That was really I thought, the coming out party for Connor Shaw. 2012, he didn't play. He was injured. Dylan Thompson engineered a 27-17 win at Death Valley. And then I think South Carolina got like 5 turnovers in the 31-17 win in Taj Boyd's last game in the rivalry. And this year, we'll see. But historically speaking, you kind of got to like South Carolina's chances based off those numbers.
I could see that. And I did a little bit of an article for The State this week looking back at some key elements of Gamecocks wins and quarterback play in South Carolina wins going back to the 90s. And I had kind of forgotten this, but a lot of South Carolina's wins in this series, at least since 1990, tend to come up in the upstate instead of down in Columbia, which I thought just seemed like an interesting fact. I don't know. I'm just outside the fact that there's the overlap with the women's basketball game, which I think is not great. I'm real excited to watch, just to watch 2 good teams go at it and see who makes a couple plays that pop.
So from 1984 to 1998. So in 84, South Carolina won that game. They won it at the very end. In 1986, the game ended in a tie when Scott Hagler missed about a 38-yard field goal by 38 yards wide. It was horrific. Clemson did win in 88 and 90.
Mm-hmm.
Then South Carolina ripped off 3 straight in 92, 94, 96. Clemson won the You Got Fired Bowl. Tommy West and Brad Scott both fired. I think Clemson was, 3-7, maybe 2-8. South Carolina was 1-9 and ended 1-10. And then South Carolina got robbed in 2000. So you are correct. South Carolina has won more times. South Carolina did win in 2002 at home. And then they won in 2010 and 2012 at Death Valley. They won 11 and 13 at home. And so Shane Beamer has a chance to do something that's not been done since Steve Spurrier did it. And multiple things. Beat Clemson 2 times in a row in Death Valley. And this would be the first time where South Carolina has won how many road games? 4 road games.
Can't happen that often.
Let's see. Well, a win would give South Carolina their 9th win of the season, the first time since 2017. They would win 6 games in a row. That was last accomplished in 2013. It would give the Gamecocks a school record 4th win over a ranked opponent this season. And it would give the Gamecocks 4 true road wins on the season for the first time since, imagine this, 2006, where South Carolina went 6-6 and did not go to a bowl game. It'd be just the 4th time in school history South Carolina has road wins against Kentucky, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt, and they should already have it. They should have beaten Alabama, dadgummit, and they didn't. But I thought that was interesting. So let's look at South Carolina's offense against Clemson's defense, and what's the injury status, I'm wondering, on Peter Woods and R.J. Mickens, because to me, Peter Woods is by far their most disruptive player up front.
I was going to say, I think the end, TJ Parker's also been.
He's been really good. That is correct.
No, they got it. It's interesting because Parker's the one who's put the most stats, if I'm remembering correctly. But they got a lot of good dudes. Their linebackers are pretty feisty. I've always thought Barrett Carter's really good. I think some people have maybe not quite thought that way.
Yeah, he's really good.
But yeah, I think they've got a defense with a lot of good pieces. Maybe not quite superstars, but a lot of good pieces. Maybe not as much depth as you would think. A lot of those really starters play a lot of snaps, so that might be worth watching. I mean, they have decent backups, but they still really heavily rely on those main guys. But yeah, I think, it's a good unit. It's feisty. Maybe blitzes a little less than it had historically, but definitely a big challenge for the Gamecocks. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, LaNorris Sellers is probably going to have some Houdini moments. I do like the fact it is a noon kick. I can't believe Roy Philpott is on the play-by-play for this game. I would have thought it would have probably been Sean McDonough or my man that teams with Greg McElroy that had the Alabama game. But I guess since it's an ACC home game, you get Roy Philpott and Sam Acho on ESPN at noon. That's interesting. I do like it, the fact that it's a noon kick. And if South Carolina wins that game, they're going to beat the number 12 ranked team in the country, while the other 3 lost SEC teams, Alabama and Ole Miss, are going to be playing teams with a losing record. And so we're recording this on Tuesday because of the short week. Mm-hmm. The college football playoff rankings have not been revealed yet. ESPN projects South Carolina at 14. If the Gamecocks are 14 this week, to me, that's okay. There's probably going to be some more chaos. Last week, everybody focused on Ohio State, Indiana, and what the score had to be for Indiana to make it in, and then chaos ensued in the Big 12 and in the SEC, with Texas A&M losing, with Alabama losing at Oklahoma. Let's look at that now. And Ole Miss losing at Florida. I think if South Carolina beats Clemson, they have a compelling case for being the SEC team in the playoff with 3 losses, because even though they did lose to to Alabama by 2, and they did get beat handily by Ole Miss, South Carolina now has won 6 straight games. They will have beaten 4 ranked opponents. And you look back, South Carolina boat races Oklahoma and Norman. Alabama gets held to 3 points, which hadn't happened since Lou Holtz. And South Carolina did it to them in 2004 in a 20-3 win. And Ole Miss, they're going to be playing Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. Their best receivers beat up. And who's to say how many opt-outs they'll have? I mean, I think both for bowl game ramifications and for playoff ramifications, South Carolina is the most attractive team, because if you're thinking about, do I want Alabama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina for the Citrus Bowl, you probably don't want Ole Miss or Alabama, because their quarterbacks are going in the NFL draft and they ain't playing in a bowl game. And if you're talking about playoff, South Carolina probably has the best defense of the three. And if LaNorris Sellers puts together another November LaNorris Sellers performance, you can make the case he's right now playing better than any other quarterback in the SEC easily, and maybe in the country right now.
I'd agree with that. My philosophy on a lot of these playoff conversations is this: we got a nice week of eating ahead. Pour yourself a nice tall glass of whiskey on Thursday. Enjoy it. Damage will be done Saturday, and Sunday morning we can pick through the pieces. And until then, I'm just going to say it's time to watch some ball.
All right, great stuff. Ben, I can't thank you enough. Do you have a prediction, or do you have to save that for the Big Spur release of the game predictions?
No one has asked me for a prediction. I'll feel optimistic. I think South Carolina wins. I'm going to go, but close. Maybe a little like that game 2 years ago. I'm going to say, let's say 30-28.
Ooh.
Good quarterback play shows up.
No doubt. All right. Well, Ben, I can't thank you enough. We'll look forward to Rivalry Saturday, wall-to-wall games. It really kicks off, I guess, on Friday this year. It's kind of weird the Egg Bowl is not on Thursday.
It's wrong. It's not on Thursday. They should have put either that or Texas A&M. I don't care which one, but one of them should have been Thursday. That's all I'm saying.
And that game in the past has either been on Thursday or Friday, Texas A&M, but they hadn't played since 2011. And I'll say this. Wouldn't it be the most Quinn Ewers thing ever for him to completely crap his pants this weekend at Kyle Field in what will be probably the most raucous environment he's ever played a game in?
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a whole damn day.
It is chaos. The chaos is not over. Ben, take care. Happy Thanksgiving. And hopefully we'll be able to catch up on some ball after all of this shakes itself out.
Yes, sir.
That was Ben Breiner with an in-depth look at Gamecock football. Really great stuff there. All right, Alex Jones is coming up in just a couple minutes. Leave your questions, comments, scenarios in the Nana's Porch chat box. Remember, get your Nana's Porch pimento cheese this week. It's a great addition to any watch party or any tailgate, or just to your refrigerator for a snack, a sandwich. I mean, look, I grew up in Norris, okay? We used to have toasted pimento cheese and relish sandwiches. I know probably none of y'all's ever heard of that. But it's not that bad. Also, just a toasted pimento cheese with lots of pepper and finger sandwiches. Put it on a Ritz cracker, on my favorite, which is sea salt pita chip. And so go to the website, nanasporch.com. Order it today. You'll get it on Friday in time for all the big college football games. All right, let's get going now with Alex Jones. This was recorded last night right after the college football playoff rankings were released. We talk about those, and then we go on a deep dive into Gamecock football recruiting, everything from uncommitted players to all the flip targets. I asked him about everybody. And just in case you forgot, National Signing Day is 1 week from today, December the 4th. So we will have Gamecock Pod live next week on Thursday after National Signing Day, so we can bring on some folks to talk about the Gamecocks recruiting class. I have a feeling there are going to be several guys that are not going to announce until signing day, so there could be a impromptu Gamecock Pod live during signing day when and if South Carolina signs some of these guys that are going to take it all the way, including some flip candidates that Alex and I will get into after a robust discussion on the college football playoff. So here comes Alex Jones and chopping it up on favorite Thanksgiving dishes. He scored a perfect score on that, by the way, and great stuff on the college football playoff and on Gamecock football recruiting. Bear with me. I'm getting ready to put that up right now. All right, and we welcome back into Gamecock Pod Live, good friend of the program, one of the hardest working men I know. He covers all football, all recruiting, does the night show. Alex Jones from the Big Spur. Alex, is Thanksgiving at your house a meal or a day?
Oh, yeah. It is a day. Man, what a time.
I agree. It is a day. It's not just a meal. All right. So what's your favorite Thanksgiving side?
So I'm very simple in that. My favorite side dish is mac and cheese.
Absolutely. That is the only correct answer.
Yeah. I mean, I could have a plate full of mac and cheese and I'd be fine. My Thanksgiving would be made.
All right. So ham or turkey?
Ham.
Me too. And plus ham and macaroni and cheese.
You can't go wrong.
It's almost as good as peanut butter and chocolate.
Exactly. I cannot argue with that.
Combination. We are simpatico. All right. Favorite Thanksgiving dessert?
See, I'm not a big pie person, so that kind of I know Thanksgiving's a big pie thing. Like, I'm cool if there's any type of cake. I'm cool with any type of cake. So, favorite cake then? Chocolate cake. Chocolate cake. Somehow I knew that was going to be the answer. So, for me, for Thanksgiving, it's either sweet potato pie or pecan pie. Those are my favorites, but if there's a carrot cake, I ain't mad at you. I'm all about it. Or a chocolate cake, or a German chocolate cake, or an Italian cream cake.
So good stuff. All right, so Alex, man, I got a bone to pick on this college football playoff format. Number one, when you were sitting there watching the Gamecocks muck it up against Old Dominion, in your wildest dreams, did you ever believe that 2 days before Thanksgiving and on the week of the Clemson game, we would be discussing South Carolina possibly working their way into the college football playoff?
I can positively say that I had no thought that we would be sitting here talking about South Carolina being ranked where they are in the playoff with a, maybe not. It's hard to say legitimate shot because there's, I think, some things that still got to go in South Carolina's favor, but a reasonable shot that South Carolina can find their way into the playoff. So to answer the question, no, I did not see us sitting here talking about that when I was watching the Old Dominion game.
All right, so for those that missed it, the playoff rankings, South Carolina this week. So we'll start at 16 with the team most likely to win the Big 12, Arizona State. They're number 16. Now they got a game to play and then a championship game to play, probably against either number 18 Iowa State or number 25 Colorado. Well, I guess BYU, they're still in the Big 12. They're number 19. So without a bunch of chaos occurring, the winner of that conference championship is not going to be ranked in the top 12. Would you agree with that? It would take a lot of batshit crazy stuff for that. Now, maybe they'll put them at 12 just to, I guess they'll have to be at 12 because they'll be in as a conference champion, right?
Right, and with Arizona State, I've kind of been surprised of how far they've jumped so far. Like they've got the win over BYU, but before the college football playoff poll came out, I can't remember where Arizona State is in the AP, but they've just made some huge jumps in the AP poll, and that's really kind of surprised me. As far as they've jumped, I don't know if that's just them trying to get the potential Big 12 winner kind of up in the rankings, but I've been kind of surprised they've continued to jump as high as they have.
All right, so how does Clemson go from 17 to 12 by beating the Citadel, and South Carolina basically beats Wofford by the same score, and they go from, I don't know, what was South Carolina last week in the playoff, 18? They go from 18 to 15. 18. They only jump 3, but Clemson jumps 5 spots for beating the Citadel.
My guess is it's because of Alabama and Ole Miss. I was interested to see coming into this playoff rankings what they're going to do with those two teams and how they kind of stacked all three of them up with the way the head-to-head is. And I think you kind of saw tonight how much head-to-head matters with the playoff committee because of that Ole Miss and Alabama being 14 and 13. But I was really interested to see what happened to Alabama, and I kind of thought maybe they had a potential to fall a little bit further just because Alabama just did not look great against Oklahoma, and that's the team that South Carolina went to the same stadium and really had full control of that game.
No doubt. So our good friend Brad Crawford from 24/7 Sports broke down on his Twitter, X feed, the app formerly known as Twitter. That's a Prince reference, by the way. All the teams and their wins over ranked teams at the time of the game. Miami, Indiana, Clemson, Colorado, and Boise State, all of them combined have 0 wins over a ranked opponent. Yet, at least one of them, and maybe 2 of them, Miami and Indiana are going to be in the college football playoff. And maybe one more, with no wins over ranked opponents. Now, obviously, the winner of the ACC championship will have a win over a ranked opponent, right? Because SMU and Miami are both ranked. Penn State, 1 win over a ranked opponent. The same number as Auburn, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and Louisville. Notre Dame has 4 wins over ranked opponents. 2 of them were Navy and Army. They did beat Texas A&M the first game of the season. I have no idea who their other ranked win could be against. Alabama has 3. Tennessee has 3. Georgia has 3. Texas has 3. South Carolina has 3. And Arizona State has 3. Which to me, basically should eliminate everybody. Like, to me, if you're not a top 12 legitimate team, even if you win a conference, you should not be in the playoff. And on the bracket, Boise State should not be ahead of Ohio State and Penn State. The only way you should get a first-round bye is if you are one of the top 4 ranked teams, which means Miami should not get a bye. And quite frankly, I guess if Texas wins out, they get a bye, but the top 4 teams are Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. Let's say Oregon and Ohio State are going to meet in the Big 12 championship game. The loser should not drop out of the top 4. To me, those are the best 2 teams in the country. They should get first-round byes. Just because you win a crappy conference doesn't mean you deserve a first-round bye. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it should go to the truly, top teams to get that bye. I think kind of to your overall point, I think one thing I'm interested to see kind of in the future with the playoff is how teams schedule. Do they kind of see that it kind of depends on what the committee is going to look for this year, but do teams start scheduling really light in non-conference and just rack up as many wins as they can? Because does the committee value the wins over, your number of wins over, the quality of wins? And, I think, when you look at it, some of these teams don't have some of the non-conference wins right now. And sometimes, and obviously in the conference for the most part, you can't help that. But that's something that I'm really interested to see is just how teams in the future start scheduling. And do you see some of these marquee non-conference games go away? Because, you think about it with, Clemson has that Georgia loss kind of hanging over their head. And I think it's just more kind of an optics situation with them with how they lost that game. But if Clemson played some, maybe a lower level team in that game, are they more comfortably in that discussion right now? And I think that's a discussion that is going to be, maybe ramp up a little bit just because what is the committee value in that part?
All right, so I'll say this. I was happy to see Clemson at 12. I wish they would have been 10 because Ole Miss and Alabama, South Carolina lost to both of them. Ole Miss, they handed it to South Carolina. Honestly, South Carolina was a 23-point underdog at Alabama and is a Alex Herrera shanked field goal or a LaNorris Sellers fourth quarter fumble away from winning that game. And we all know we beat LSU. The SEC refs put both feet on the scales and jumped up and down on it several times. Yet LSU is South Carolina's one bad loss because they've fallen apart and they're no longer ranked. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say another interesting point in that is, you look at what happened to Florida State last year. They lose Jordan Travis, And Florida State's undefeated, but they don't get into playoff basically because the committee, I don't think, saw them as a top 4 team without Jordan Travis. Do they use that in the same light with LaNorris Sellers? He out of that second half, was not in that second half. When you listen to everybody talk about the game, even from a national perspective, they all say South Carolina probably would have won that game if LaNorris Sellers was healthy in the second half. So we haven't seen it so far kind of reflect in their rankings, but does that reflect if South Carolina finds a way to win this weekend, is that kind of the same thing, heading into this round?
Right. So to me, that should be part of the conversation. So South Carolina is 15. They beat 12. They're dropping, right? Alabama and Ole Miss both play teams with losing records. South Carolina wins, they should jump Alabama and Ole Miss. And honestly, let's look at Ole Miss losing in November in the swamp to Florida, who was basically left for dead 2 or 3 weeks ago. And at the beginning of the season, the odds were Billy Napier was going to be the first coach fired. Granted, Florida's going to have a pretty good season, but that was I said it. Wouldn't it be, and I said it before the game, wouldn't it be the most Lane Kiffin thing ever after they beat Georgia to go to Florida and lose? And they did. Alabama went to the same field, Alex, where I guess you were in the press box and I was in the end zone, and I watched South Carolina curb stomp Oklahoma 35-9. Alabama scored 3 points on that same field in November. Okay. Also, South Carolina would have 6 straight wins, 4 over ranked opponents at the time of the game in the month of November, in the last half of the season. Okay. Honestly, how do you keep them out of the playoff at that point? Because to me, I've never, and JC, nobody really believes the outcome of the Carolina-Clemson game is the deciding factor for a recruit. But this year, the college football playoff and the teams that make it, that's the big separator in recruiting, at least for next year. If you can say, hey, we went from 5-7 to the college football playoff, and we're the hottest team in America right now, and you could be able to do it before well, no, you won't be able to do it before National Signing Day because that's it's before the conference championships and the final release of the poll. But I'd be pumping it if I'm Shane Beamer if I beat Clemson. And he was pretty adamant about it today at his press conference. But to me, that's really the case, is you're the hottest team. Ole Miss and Alabama have bad losses. You just beat Clemson. Somebody else is going to lose. I mean, I'll say this right here. It would be the most Quinn Ewers thing ever for him to go to College Station this weekend and absolutely crap his pants and A&M beat Texas. Honestly, it'd be the most Texas thing ever.
Yeah, I think the two teams South Carolina, obviously, let's say South Carolina wins this weekend. The two teams you're really from the SEC keep an eye on is Ole Miss, Alabama. I think of those two teams, Alabama's probably the more likely to lose a game. I just don't see Mississippi State being able to keep up with Ole Miss, especially being in Oxford. But Auburn, it seems to always have, it's the Iron Bowl. You never really know what's going to happen in that game. And I think, obviously, you still need more. If Alabama finds a way to lose that game, you still need some more to happen. But to your point, overall, South Carolina's going to go in with a big win. If let's say South Carolina wins the Clemson game, they're going to go into the selection time with a huge winning streak. You're playing if South Carolina goes into that game with the winning streak and the way they're playing, I'm not sure how you can say that they're not one of the best 12 teams in the country. And it's not like they're not playing against really good teams in this stretch. I mean, they went to Oklahoma and got a win. And we saw what Oklahoma just did. You beat Missouri, who, was a top 25 team. You beat A&M, who, is a really, really good team too. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where South Carolina, has to find a way to take care of business this weekend and leave it up to the committee. And then we'll kind of find out what's, I think, really important to the committee, with what they're looking for because it'd be hard I think it'd be really hard to deny what South Carolina's done if they can find a way to get it done this weekend.
I mean, I think one of the most underrated things is people are not talking about the Missouri win enough, because South Carolina is the only team this year to beat Missouri when Brady Cook went the distance.
Yeah.
The only team to beat them. Right? He was injured. They were a top 10 team prior to Brady Cook going down. They got beat bad by Alabama and A&M back-to-back with him not able to play or to finish the games. I mean, hell, he went to the hospital, left the Auburn game, went to the hospital, come back, and led the fourth quarter comeback against Auburn.
Yeah.
With Brady Cook, Missouri is legit. I don't think that gets enough play. But
I mean, I think that was Missouri's best shot too. That was probably the best game they've played overall this season. You got Missouri's best shot and still found a way to win. It got a little, for South Carolina, got a little scary there at the end with the Luther Burden and Brady Cook play, but you still found a way to win. And from what I've seen from Missouri, they're really their best shot the whole year.
I agree. Well, I mean, honestly, the Clemson game right now, that's South Carolina's college football first round playoff game. If you don't win that, you got eliminated. So it's all about that. All right. Let's switch gears to recruiting, because 1 week, spoiler alert to everybody, we're recording this on Tuesday night. But 1 week from tomorrow is National Signing Day, December the 4th. South Carolina currently, I believe, has the 22nd ranked class in the 24/7 sports composite. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
I hit the wrong thing. Team rankings. South Carolina, nope, 24th now.
24th, okay.
I guess TCU getting Kelton McHale, who South Carolina decided not to take, has bumped them up. But South Carolina is still, there's a lot of stuff going on with South Carolina recruiting. And so it has to be good news that Mike Tyler did not go to LSU's last home game. He came to South Carolina to watch them play Wofford. He's certainly on flip watch. Kevin Wynn, the defensive tackle that South Carolina has been vigorously pursuing, he was back for that game as well. His teammate, Steve Miller, not from the Steve Miller Band, was in on an official visit. Christian Ingram, big defensive tackle out of Conyers, Georgia. His brother actually played basketball at Georgia. Is a guy that is a riser, 6'6", 290. He visited Kentucky, Michigan, Georgia officially, South Carolina. He was supposed to go to Vanderbilt. Now he's going to Southern Cal. Him and Steve Miller both will be at Southern Cal this weekend. I just don't know about these Georgia boys that talk about playing close to home going to Southern Cal. So that's really the first group. And then there's Donovan Murph, the Irmo wide receiver, who also he visited Clemson officially. He's been a big South Carolina lean. How do you see it going with those guys? That's the first wave of guys. Let's go with Ingram and Murph first, since they're totally uncommitted.
Yeah, I think with Ingram, I kind of like where South Carolina is right now. It sounds like they've done a really good job since they've gotten in, and he's kind of been a late riser here. You don't really see that too often anymore, it feels like, but really been kind of one of these true late risers, and it's not one. He's one of those two who has a ton of offers to his name. I mean, you mentioned Georgia and Kentucky, and you think about those two schools. Those two schools know what they're looking for in defensive linemen. So I think South Carolina has put themselves in a good spot. I think they did a really good job here with him over his official visit.
All right, good stuff. How would you categorize Donovan Murph?
I still like where South Carolina is in this one. I know he was at the official visit with Clemson this past weekend, and there's certainly a player in this. They have, put a ton of wide receivers in the NFL. South Carolina obviously also just had a first-round draft pick, Xavier Legette. So, South Carolina has built a really, really strong relationship with them, and he's, I know he's close with those other receiver commits, specifically Malik Clark and Jordan Gidron. Gidron was another one who reclassified from that 26 to 25 class. So, I think it could be a battle, just a battle with him all the way to signing day or when he commits at the Under Armour game. And so I think it's going to be a battle, but I think I still like where South Carolina stands currently.
All right, so what's the odds that his school of choice convinces him to go ahead and sign the papers, and they don't announce it until after he makes his commitment at the Under Armour game on January 2nd?
I'm sure the school's going to try to get that done just because, they want to go ahead and try. You might as well because if he's not signed, if he's not signed, he can still, talk to other schools. But, I think it's certainly going to be the school of his choice is going to try to get that done.
All right, good stuff. All right, so here's the second wave. Guys committed to other schools that were at South Carolina on Saturday. So that would be LSU tight end commit Mike Tyler from Columbia, the Hammond School, Kevin Wynn, the defensive tackle, and then Steve Miller, the defensive back who took his official visit to South Carolina this past weekend.
Yeah, of those, I think I like South Carolina's chances the best with Mike Tyler. Him being, one with, I think being the LSU commit, I think, and then also being just a guy who's right from down the road at Hammond. He's been to South Carolina a ton here recently. It's kind of been an interesting recruitment. South Carolina was in on him pretty early, and then it seems like things kind of maybe cooled off a little bit. And I think, he committed to LSU, and South Carolina wasn't in his final three. And then now South Carolina's going to come back around, and Preston Douglas, who was in the class for South Carolina, is no longer in the class and committed to NC State. And I think South Carolina's really gone after Mike Tyler, made him a priority, and he feels that. So of that group, I feel, maybe the best about South Carolina's chances with him to eventually get him into class. And, Kevin Wynn, he's one who it feels like we've been tracking him for a long time. He was one who they've built a solid relationship early on. He was at the spring game, continued to build a relationship with Travian Robertson, then ultimately committed to Florida State. Florida State's had the season that they've had so far, and he's visited a few times South Carolina, and I think the schools with him to watch I think he is still going to visit Florida State here this weekend. I think he's also going to take a trip to Athens, and I think Georgia and Texas are really the schools to watch for him. But South Carolina has built a strong relationship here, and I think they're right there in the thick of it. And then with him and his teammate, Steve Miller at Greene County, Steve Miller was also in this weekend for an official visit. He was supposed to be in the weekend before, but he and Kevin Wynn had the playoff game, so they had to push it back a week. And I think with him, I think it's going to be a battle to signing day with him to see if they can get him to offer that Southern Cal commitment. Southern, obviously it is a far away, but Southern Cal still has that brand name school, and I think a lot of recruits are still attracted to that. I think the play here is just, for him it's a proximity thing. he obviously is, kind of being from that area is kind of close with the Kilgore family, Gerald and Jalen Kilgore. So I think that could be one that, they're recruiting him hard, and they're going to see if they can try to get him off of that Southern Cal commitment and see if they can get him to add to that class.
I really hope Notre Dame beats them by about 35 points Saturday. They'll be 6-6 after they lose to Notre Dame on Saturday.
And that goes back to our playoff talk there too. That's another team that South Carolina's battling a playoff spot for us. That'd be another spot too, just to go along with your recruiting side of that too.
Yeah, well, that's true. If Southern Cal upsets Notre Dame, they're out, because that would be losing to a 6-5 team, and they lost to Northern Illinois at home. To me,
yep.
That is disqualifying enough, but I digress. All right, so 2 guys that South Carolina is still recruiting that are committed to other schools that have taken official visits to South Carolina. Warner Robins Northside 4-star cornerback Michael Clayton. He's been committed to Rutgers. He visited South Carolina. He told Phil Kornblut he grew up with the Kilgores, running track with them. So there's a relationship with the Kilgores with Michael Clayton, and he's a sub-10, 500 meters guy. South Carolina needs a high school corner. And then junior college defensive tackle Xavier Hardy. He committed to Mississippi State out of the blue. He visited, and I'm going to throw the third guy in this, but I already know the answer. Jared Smith, wasn't he at the Missouri game?
Yep.
Didn't Auburn have a home game?
I think that was the Louisiana Monroe weekend home game.
Right. I'm still pulling for Alabama to beat Auburn by 50 on Saturday. But, I know it's going to go to the very end on Jared Smith. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But what about Michael Clayton and Xavier Hardy?
So with Clayton, you brought up, his size, 6'1", 170 guy. Seems like he fits that kind of perfect mold that Torian Gray and Clayton White really look for in a corner, and really what they look for in the secondary. And I think they've kind of made him a priority. Has been committed to Rutgers for some time now, and has visited South Carolina, hasn't backed off that commitment. So I think you kind of talked with Jared Smith about it coming down to the wire. I think this is another one that's going to come down to the wire. Is it going to be another case of just proximity to home win because Georgia to Piscataway, New Jersey? I mean, that's a long ways away, and Georgia to Columbia is a little bit short of a trip. So I think is that going to be one where they went out there with the proximity to home? And then when I think it was Xavier Hardy was the other one.
Yep.
Yeah, Xavier Hardy's kind of been quiet here recently on that. It kind of been an interesting recruitment, with what being in that class and then going to Mississippi State. I think, obviously if they can find a way to land him win in the class, I mean, that's to go along with Caleb Williams. I mean, you talk about kind of reloading that room. And, I think I hate to keep saying this, but I think that's another one that is going to come down to the wire to see if they can get him to flip from the in-state Mississippi State. I say in-state just because he's at East Mississippi Community College, and he committed to Mississippi State about a month or so ago, and they haven't backed off at all. And then to the next one, Jared Smith. I'll say it again. This is another one that's going to come down to the wire with him. He's still committed to Auburn. I think it is going to come down to the wire. And I've always wondered how. I've always thought it was going to be difficult just because he's an in-state 5-star guy, or in-state in Alabama, Auburn. I think it's going to be tough to pull that one off. I'm not saying South Carolina can't do it, but I feel like Auburn's really going to do what they have to, really go all out to make sure they keep him in that class, because they've recruited that state really well this year and really recruited overall really well. So I think South Carolina has a chance. They've really kind of kept a good, strong relationship with Sterling Lucas and Shane Beamer, and the family has built a strong relationship. And when he came for that Missouri game, he was or stayed overnight and was left early the next morning. So I think they've given themselves a chance. So we'll see if they can do enough to get them to leave the home state Tigers.
All right, so also taking an official visit to South Carolina last weekend, Christchurch wide receiver Jackson Rep, 5'8", 160. I know a guy that was at camp in July, the same day he ran back-to-back 40s that were like 4.25s, hand-timed, which means he is a legit 4.3 40 guy, but he did tear his ACL. He is on the small side. South Carolina has 5 wide receivers committed. Murph would make 6. Are they talking to him about a gray shirt because of the knee injury? Where do you think things stand with Jackson Rep?
Yeah, to be completely honest, I don't have a great feel on what the plan is for him, moving forward with this class. That he does have the offer that he got, I think back in the summer, and looked really good in the camps, and then had the unfortunate injury that kind of ended his season early. And I don't have too much of a feel, to be honest, what plans are with him. Something that we're going to obviously figure out here before signing day gets underway.
All right, so I'm running out of names to ask you about, which is a good thing because I don't want to keep you too long. And so other than wide receiver, all these guys I've asked you about have been defensive guys other than Murph and Rep and Mike Tyler. Damola Adjudant, committed to Georgia Tech, visited South Carolina, came back for an official visit to South Carolina, came back for multiple other games to South Carolina. Even after he visited Ohio State, he was back in Columbia again for a South Carolina game. He says he's making a decision next week. South Carolina backed off of Kevin P. and Jimmy Bryson, perhaps because the number was too high, perhaps to consolidate the NIL money for a better player. Adjudant, the guys from Duluth, Georgia, George Rogers played there as high school coach. I think must have played with George Rogers. There's some connection. And South Carolina has a 2026 commitment from Duluth High School. Can Lonnie Teasley, Sam Serbay, and Shane Beamer and Dow Loggins pull off the flip for a guy that looks like $1 million as an offensive tackle, quite frankly, prospect?
Yeah, with him, they've done a really good job because obviously we always say kind of follow the visits, and he's been to South Carolina multiple times this season. This is truly a Georgia Tech South. I think it's Georgia Tech and South Carolina that's going to come down to. Does he stick with that Georgia Tech commitment? He visited for that NC State home game, and I think that gives you a little bit of pause just because he did go back there for a big win that Georgia Tech had, and Brinke obviously is a really good recruiter, and especially that offensive line. And they've done, South Carolina was after those other two with Jimmy Bryson and Kevin P, and those two are going to stick. So, I think South Carolina's done what it has to do to give them the chance, but now it's just seeing if they can get them into the class. But Georgia Tech, I think, is going to make it really tough.
All right, so I got 2 junior. All right, so let me ask you this. Braxton Kyle, defensive tackle from Georgia, committed to Rutgers, unofficially visited South Carolina did not come back for an official, or are you still tracking him at all?
Yeah, I think a little bit, but it's honestly been kind of quiet there recently with him. I think there's some others. I think more specifically, I think I'm more watching right now those other guys that we've kind of talked about earlier in the show.
I agree. All right, so how about this guy? He's visited South Carolina officially. Shandavian Bradley, Xavier Hardy's the number 1 JUCO defensive tackle in the country. Shandavian Bradley signed with Tennessee. South Carolina, Sterling Lucas recruited the snot out of him. He left, went to junior college. He's a bounce-back guy. Does it matter that he hadn't officially visited South Carolina? Could you see South Carolina signing him? Or can junior college guys, can they visit in December?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. And I think kind of with nothing, I don't think anything as of this moment, you're talking about Shandavian Bradley is scheduled from a visit standpoint, but he's had a couple of visits. I think he went to Oklahoma State, and I think that's one where you kind of mentioned it with the high school recruiting. I think he knows what South Carolina's about just from because Sterling Lucas is still here. Sterling Lucas was his recruiter. He visited a few times, and so I'm not sure if he is going to if he's going to make a move with South Carolina if a visit's necessary, just because he's been to South Carolina so many times. I think he's got a pretty good idea of what the program's about.
And it is the only SEC school that he's currently involved with. It's Kansas, Oklahoma State, South Carolina. He's been to South Carolina. Sterling Lucas on the case. I think that bodes well for the Gamecocks. And so how about like Seven Cloud or any of these other JUCO defensive tackles? Or, are some of these guys going to wait till February, like Mabachu and Victor, what's his name, that are both from Grayson? Carolina offered them. I don't know. I think if South Carolina can get Christian Ingram to go with Caleb Williams, and then they get Kevin Wynn and maybe Xavier Hardy, even without him, I think they're probably just going to the portal. What do you think for defensive tackle?
Yeah, I kind of think. Yeah, I think they would, just because you're going to want some older guys in that room. Just having some of those. You got, obviously, if you get Xavier Hardy as a JUCO, that's an older guy, but a guy from maybe like a Power 5 level or whatnot that they could find as an older guy. And you mentioned Mbachu. I think I'm saying that right. He just committed to Texas a couple of days ago. So obviously, I think that recruitment, obviously that South Carolina's not going to get him, but yeah, I kind of agree with your stance there. If they can find a way to close on the guys that we've talked about here earlier, probably go to the portal just to get some more veteran, more experienced guys.
No doubt. Alex Jones, you are the man. Thank you so much for doing this. You bring it. We love having you on the show. Your internet was great tonight. So that's always a plus. Yes. Happy Thanksgiving. I won't ask you for a score because I know you guys do the release on late Friday or Saturday. But I might ask you which way you're leaning on this Palmetto Bowl game. Alex, South Carolina and Clemson have met this will be the 7th time they've met when both teams are ranked in the top 25. South Carolina is 5-1 in those 6 meetings, and the only one they lost was the push-off game with Rod Gardner. So they actually should be 6-0 against Clemson when both teams are ranked. Will that be a determining factor in your pick?
I'm not sure about. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to lean on the previous games for this one, but to be honest, I'm starting to lean South Carolina in this game. I think I like some of the matchups in this game. Just to kind of quick overview, I think it's going to be interesting to see South Carolina's run game against Clemson's defense run game. Clemson's defense has kind of been susceptible to the run a little bit this year, and LaNorris Sellers is playing his best ball right now, and he's playing at a really high level. And it's kind of hard to doubt what he's been doing here so far. And defensively, South Carolina's got to find a way to contain Phil Maffa, who's a really solid running back and has led Clemson this year. And Klubnik's kind of the same. He can really do some things with his legs and make plays through the air. So, right now I'm kind of leaning South Carolina that finds a way to get a victory in this one. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be maybe a less than a touchdown game, but I think I'm leaning right now South Carolina was going to win.
All right, the great Alex Jones, you've asked every question perfectly correct, particularly on Thanksgiving. So, Alex, thanks. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the day with your loved ones, and you'll need your coat because it's going to be a chilly day. The high 51, 52 degrees, so it'll be in the 40s at kickoff at noon at Frank Howard Memorial Stadium because Death Valley is in Baton Rouge. So happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for doing this. Great stuff, Alex, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody else that's watching.
All right, that was Alex Jones. Great stuff today for Ben Breiner and Alex Jones. Thanks to all of you for watching. Thanks to all of you who will listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or catch it later on YouTube. If you are not a member of the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit the like, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you would like more of this podcast every single day, Monday through Friday, and on Sunday during football season, when I drop the morning after podcast on Tuesday night, yesterday I did 4 separate podcasts. I recorded the interview with Ben Breiner. Then after Shane Beamer's press conference, we did the Super Tuesday show. Then last night from 7 until 8:30, we had the Garnet and Black Town Hall as recorded for about an hour, and then we had a 30-minute unrecorded overtime. And then I recorded that interview with Alex Jones to get ready for today. William, thanks. Glad you enjoyed it. I apologize for the internet difficulties at the beginning, but we got all that worked out. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thanksgiving is a day to reflect and be thankful for your family, for your friends. As we all know, you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. And if you pick wisely, like me, a lot of your friends are your family. And to be thankful for this outstanding season of Gamecock football, even though it's almost over. But hopefully we'll have 3 or 4 more games after Saturday. It'll probably be after the conference championship Saturday. Before that, Gamecocks are going to sign at least a top 20 class, potentially a top 15 class, depending on how that shakes out. So we will be back on Thursday next week, the day after National Signing Day on Gamecock Pod Live. But there could be an impromptu rapid reaction Gamecock Pod Live on Twitter and on YouTube. So stay tuned on National Signing Day. We'll have our regular podcast as well. And so from my family to all of yours, happy Thanksgiving. God bless. Go Gamecocks. And we'll be back next week. Until then, I'm out of here. Hey, just not beat Clemson. Beat the hell out of Clemson. And Cox by 90. I'm out of here.